Yes, and now that we know, let's start the show. That's my favorite part of that song. What's going on, everybody? Hey, good evening. This is Pastor B. How are you? I hope you guys are doing fine. And it is March. Welcome to Life Forum. It is Life Tuesday. It is March, and it is Women's History Month. And I'm so excited because we're celebrating all month. We're going to have some awesome conversations this month, honoring so many women who've done so many amazing things in our history and have made changes for the better. But tonight, this is going to be pre-recorded. This is actually an oldie but a goodie, because what better way to start Women's History Month than to have one of our most popular life classes. Now this was when it was life class. Now it's life forum. But when we had life class, we had one of probably one of our most popular classes. It was called Land Assignments, and it was taught none other by our Apostle Shazetta Morris, aka BKA Coach She. And it was an amazing class. And we want you guys to experience it, especially with everything that we're dealing with right now. If you've been living under a rock, then you probably don't know. But with everything that we're experiencing from a local, a national, a global scale, it's important to know where we fit in that space. So we need to know about land assignments. We need to know where God has us, where what our assignments are, and the necessities and the necessary things that we need to do in order for us to be effective where God has called us to be. So, yeah, sit back, relax, get a pen, get some paper, because it's going to be a lot of great information that you can take away with you. And this is Coach She, Apostle Shazetta Morris, with Land Assignments. Enjoy.
I'm assuming y'all still hear me. I'm going to assume that that is correct. We get back to that. We'll start talking about, yep, basically don't sit on your butt when you have a good assumption, Mimi. Love that. Love that. Some more of you chat in and just let us know what spoke to you the most. And that to many might be the thing that speaks to them the most about fulfilling purpose assignment. Well, let me hit some highlights here while we are waiting. It really moves me and got me off my butt. I'm glad. That's good for a lot of different reasons. Not that you are a lazy individual. I don't even think that anybody is really lazy in that sense, but sometimes we lack direction. Sometimes we don't know how to appreciate or ascribe to what is around us. And because of that misinterpretation, because we don't have that kind of direction, we kind of sit waiting for things to happen, when in reality, there are some things that we can be doing that will help us move forward in the purpose of God individually for us, and understanding all of the things that we've been given. Yes, Lord, that we've been given in order to move about and move in. So we talked about terra firma. We are developed from the dust. And that statement came back to me today so clearly: to become more in relationship with the land. Yep, I'm currently in, and the lands I'm going to. Yes. Principality or philosophy that is governing right. Yes, love that. Thank you so much for that. That was a great highlight. Um, we are developed from the dust, particles of the ground. And that was so interesting to me, because I think automatically people assume that that just means dirt. But even when you look around your house and you look around and you are dusting your home and you see dust, dust is an energy. Where did dust come from? Have you ever really thought about that? They say that dust comes from human skin. It can come from animal activity. It can come from because it is a particle. It can come from anything, but mainly the dust that we are dusting away is coming from us. Have you even really thought about that? Right? Most things we don't appreciate because we don't know it. We have no understanding of it. So from dust particles you've come, to dust particles you shall return. So when people talk about that, you're returning to dirt, you're not necessarily returning to dirt, but we're formed in energy, and you're returning back to energy. That mobility, that thing that moves around like dust. I hope somebody got it. I hope you got it. I hope you got it. We talked about the sons of Issachar, scientists, geologists, in relationship with their form. Somebody say that. I want to be more in relationship with myself. Everything that you see is literally just a reflection of yourself. It is in a different form. Here's how you understand that. Water has several different forms, but at its core base, it is still water. Ice is still water. Yep. It is just the frozen form of the liquid. And so we've got to see ourselves in different expressions or different forms. And when I understand that, I start to move in an appreciation of the different forms that I am or can become. Yeah, that was good. I'm glad it was recorded so I could go back and listen to it, right? Yeah, so here's some of those systems. I removed a lot of the pictures, but this hurricane piece is a big deal. Something came back to me today, even as I was kind of meditating on this particular experience and the teaching. And I remember when we were in last hurricane, Hurricane Irma, and they talked about the reality of how big that hurricane was. I think it reached a Cat 5. And when they were talking about it, especially from the South Florida experience, those of you that are from here, you will know it or you will remember it if you paid attention to it. Most people were concerned that that was a manufactured storm. That thing grew so big that it had to be manipulated in order to grow that big. And I, as I listened to it, I wondered about it. I said, oh my goodness, what was the purpose of this? And you had all kinds of ideas coming about. People felt like, okay, this storm was manipulated. It was scientifically made in order to produce something so that we could see what kind of destruction there would be. And if that was the truth, then the casualties were the risks that were inhibited or expected as a result of that, particular storm. Brianna asked, how was it manipulated though? Well, the manipulation, whether you like that word or not, manipulation in a sense is not a bad word. There are things that are being cooked up in the rooms of scientists all day long in order to determine what effects certain things have on our earth. And this is why, thank you, I feel strength right there. I felt it. Thank you for asking that question. The reason why we've got to really be conscious of this piece is not for a sake or a sense of fear, but we've got to understand that even when, and I'm getting ahead of myself in the slides, but I'm going to get there. When we talk about, even when the scriptures talk about have dominion over, the reality is that we're not trying to have dominion over something. We're really trying to come into concert with it or come into understanding of it or come into cooperation with it. And see, this is the thing that if we talk about this storm in particular, scientists for years, if you watch, have been launching situations like hurricane trackers. They'll send information in the middle of a hurricane in order to understand its ideology, understand how it moves, understand how it's developed, understand how it formed in order to, now why do you think that they're learning that? They're learning that so that they can manipulate it or replicate it in order to use it for its purposes. Now, dominion is an interesting thing because the way that you determine dominion would suggest that everything that God has given you is under your control. But it cannot be under your control if you don't understand how to control it. It can't be under your control if you refuse to understand its real purpose and how it's supposed to surround you in your purpose. You will never come to agreement or understanding of a thing, or rather dominion of a thing, if you fail to realize that these things have been, can be adjusted in order for them to affect a certain thing a different way. The same way that they grew this hurricane is the same way that they could have diminished it, but somebody in power chose not to. Woo! That's why dominion in the wrong hands is ineffective. Here's the indictment to the church, people of God, beloved. That's why we are powerless, because there is no understanding of the reality or the stretch of our dominion authority. It is not to control weather systems, or it's not to control the earth. As a matter of fact, in and of itself, the earth has its own mechanism of understanding, of alignment. It understands when there is a need for rain. It understands when there is a need for fire. It understands when there is a need for a cataclysmic shift. So that is what we call an earthquake. It understands how it's supposed to maintain itself. The problem that we have now, specifically as it relates to how they're talking about climate change, is not that the earth is heating up. It's really the fact that we haven't listened to the earth tell us how to navigate itself. And when we don't listen, we destroy. When we don't listen, we limit capacities. When we fail to understand that the tree is having a conversation, but then we throw trash around the tree because we don't feel that it is significant, we are not coming into cooperation or concert with the purpose of the tree. Do you know that the tree planted in specific areas is purposed to clean our air? So when there is a preponderance of pollution, the tree is absorbing what humanity is not supposed to handle in their body. We need to listen to what the earth is saying so that we can understand that we are the earth and the earth is us. It's the very reason why we move throughout the earth and don't know where we are or where we're going, because we refuse to listen to what it is speaking to us. And this is just in a general purpose, a general perspective, right? We're refusing to listen, or we feel that only science or scientists are only allowed, or the only allowed individuals to hear what's going on in the earth, and then we listen to them. As much as I understand the specialty, there is an idea that every person needs to become acquainted with what it is that they're supposed to do in their human purpose, right? And then become acquainted in relationship to how all things exist and how we serve the purpose of the earth and how the earth serves our purpose. You've got to be in this position where you are more in tune with things in you and around you. That's why the scripture, when it talks about first the natural, then the spiritual, we're jumping into spiritual heights, but we miss the lesson because we're never going to learn the lesson from a spiritual place. We have to learn it from natural existence. So we jump the line and then we miss all of these concepts. Have you ever met someone who's been with God all of these years, but yet they don't know God because how we learn him is through nature? Spiritual truths are hidden in nature. They're hidden in nature, and they're waiting for us to ask it the question. Why does the grass grow this way? Why is the grass on this land growing this way? How is it possible for it to rain across the street on the same street and it be dry right here? What do I know about weather systems and weather patterns? What do I know about the barometric pressure? Let's go here. What do I know about my city? What do I know about where I live currently? Because see, this is a vast teaching. It talks about so many different things. And here we'll address this again, the principles space or the principles understanding, right? Every space or area has a principle of development. We tend to typically deal with the principality as if it is demonic or if it is against God. But when I tell you that everything that has been developed in the earth, in the universe, It's created to show us God. It's created for us to experiment as God. It is created for us to live as God. The principles are designed to work for you. But if you are looking at the principles and assuming that they're demonic and you're calling them demons and devils, then it is clear to me that you do not understand or have come into relationship with the land that is already been developed to work in concert with you. So that is a challenge for most of us, because we will kick the rock instead of speaking to it. Yep. All of you Christians that have been in church for a while, you understand the idea of the kicking of the rock versus speaking to it. It is the idea of when Moses, in his frustration, did not appreciate the source of supply that came through the rock. The representation, of course, was Christ, or God rather, but there was something more symbolic in how he assumed that the rock had no significance. And because it doesn't move like us, because it's not shaped like us, because it's not fashioned like us, we assume that it has no value. But there are principles that govern every space. There are principles in the earth that govern it, that we don't even have to speak to. We just need to understand. It was already etched in the earth's inhabitants as it relates to how it functions. It's the very reason why the land was able to separate itself from the waters. The waters know how high they need to get. They know when it's too low. They know how to find water sources from up under the ground. They know what to do in order to handle itself. As a matter of fact, listen, when we experience or when we pay attention to the fires that take place in California, there was a year that I was out in California at a retreat. And we were in the retreat was in the mountains, and there were fires surrounding us. They let us come in because the fires were not that high at that point. I remember it in San Diego, but there was a point where the fires got so high up on the mountain that they told us that we needed to evacuate. So there was fear throughout the city. There was fear throughout the desert with these fires destroying homes, destroying houses in different places. People were having to wear masks at that time in order to secure their air quality or their personal airspace. But what I realized is that after the fires commenced, and when people thought that there was complete destruction, when the firemen would go through the rubble of the fire that was laid out in the mountains, there was new green grass growing. You know why that's important? Because what we would look at as a bad thing or a demonic thing was the earth itself allowing itself to recreate itself. But we don't appreciate that. You know why? Because we focus on what was lost. But we don't understand the idea or the principle of what needed to be renewed. The earth is doing things, even now today, that we're not paying attention to in order to sustain itself. And if we, what we consider the higher being, which I don't always think we are, right? We just don't pay attention. But if the higher being would pay more attention, the earth would teach us how to manage in its space or manage in an area. So we talk about the principles. There is a ruling principle. Hallelujah. Oh my, I feel Jesus. I feel all of Jesus. I feel all of God in this space. There is a ruling principle in every area. And before you even try to enter into an area, the first thing that you should probably do is introduce yourself to the atmosphere so that it recognizes you and you start to learn and recognize it. That has nothing to do with demonic activity. It has everything to do with the reverence that we need to have as it relates to how we engage this space that he has called us to have, quote unquote, dominion in. It's nice to have all of these things built on a land until the land opens itself up and swallows you up because you did not pick up the fact that the land was not equipped to hold a house, or this land wasn't equipped to hold a 10-story building, or this land wasn't equipped. Your Lord Jesus. Oh man, listen, that'll mess people up all day long, because when we think about other things in that reality, there are often times where we have to say, if I do this, this is not good for the earth, which I'm supposed to inherit. If I do this, this is not good for the land that I live in. Principalities. See that? So we went over that last week. State, office, or authority. The prince of an area. Principal, municipality, the municipal, the principal that manages those different areas. It's important that you understand position or responsibilities of a principal, an individual that governs or manages a territory or a jurisdiction. It is important that you understand that it is not just about your church status. It's not just about your organization status. How do you relate with the land that you're in? The land mass and the land energy. The land mass and the land energy. Y'all see that? Okay, good. I think that's where we ended that last slide. Genesis 45. We've got to understand the land in context to the scriptures. And I want to show you this particular expression. If you are familiar with the scripture, you will know exactly what this expression is going to show you. Genesis 45. I want you to look at it. I'm looking at it, and I'm going to highlight here these bullet points here that we see. I want to start at Genesis 4. No, let's start at number 1. Okay? Because I want to have context around this. I don't want you to just see a scripture and then try to understand it in a false understanding. I want you to understand the context of it. Y'all still with me? Somebody say yes. Yes, I don't want to be hollering up here by myself. I'm not going to holler up here by myself. Say yes. Yep. Yeah, thank you. Here we go. Then Joseph could not control himself any longer. Y'all know where this is started from, right? Joseph's brothers, according to the story, put him in a pit. And they thought he was dead. So Joseph goes through this whole expression of living in the pit, being sold into slavery, put in prison. And then the years go by and he's being developed as a slave or a prisoner, right? It says this in the first verse, then Joseph could not control himself any longer in front of all of those who attended him. And he called out, have everyone leave me. So no man stood there when Joseph revealed himself to his brothers. This is coming out of the Amplified Version. Joseph wept aloud, and the Egyptians who had just left him heard it, and the household of Pharaoh heard it. Then Joseph said to his brothers, I am Joseph, is my father alive? But his brothers were speechless, for they were stunned and dismayed by the fact that they were in Joseph's presence. Why? Because they thought he was dead. They thought that he had lost his life. But here's verse 4. It says, and Joseph said to his brothers, pay close attention here. I want you to pay close attention here to this, okay? And Joseph said to his brothers, please come closer to me. And they approached him, and he said, I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into Egypt. Now, do not be distressed or angry with yourselves because you sold me here, for God sent me ahead of you to save your life and to preserve our family. Okay? Wonderful. His life is saved, his brothers' lives are saved, and his family's life is saved. The next part tells us how. Okay? It says this in Verse 6, for the famine has been in the land these 2 years. And there are still 5 more years in which there will be no plowing and no harvesting. You know what Joseph is saying? He's saying, listen, I've been watching. He was the one that interpreted the dream, right? He was watching the land dry up. And as a result of this famine coming into the land, and as a result of the preparation through the dream, they decided not to plow and not to harvest any of the land until the famine was lifted. Y'all see that? This is the reason why he can tell them that this famine has been in the land so far for 2 years, and there's still 5 more years that we have to contend with. So there is no plowing and no harvesting. So there is no planting, there is no receiving, there is no seed in the ground, there is no harvest. And they had committed to that because there was going to be this famine for 7 years, right? So the story before this tells how they siphoned off food and sustenance in order to last them through the famine. Okay, a couple scriptures before, you'll be able to see it. That's how Egypt survived the famine. Okay, I just want to catch you up there. Verse 7 says, God sent me to Egypt ahead of you to preserve for you a remnant on the earth and to keep you alive by a great escape. What's the escape, God? Verse 8 says, so now it was not you who sent me here, but God. He understood his purpose. He was mad at the fact that he was in prison, but he understood it now that he's on the other side of it. Watch this. Pay close attention. God sent me here to preserve you all. He sent me ahead of you. Yeah. Oh my goodness. I'm sorry. Somebody just said that to me yesterday and it just came back to me. There are times where God will send you ahead of someone in order to prepare a thing. I hear that all the time. Heard it again recently. Okay, so verse 8. So now it was not you who sent me here, but God. And he has made me a father to Pharaoh. He has made me. Y'all see that? God has made me a slave, a father to Pharaoh. That's not where we're going to focus in this text, but I want you to highlight it. You need to spend some study time there, understanding how a slave, an imprisoned person, becomes a pharaoh or a father to the authority of that land. Okay? Verse 9 says, hurry and go up to my father and tell him, your son Joseph says this to you. God has made me Lord of all of Egypt. Come down to me, do not delay. Verse 10, pay attention. You shall live in the land of Goshen, the best pasture land of Egypt. I just said to you that the famine has been in the land for 2 years, and there are still 5 more years in which there will be no plowing and no harvesting. They're in the midst of a famine, but Joseph says that you're going to live in a place that is the best pasture of land of Egypt. Y'all see that? How does the famine, where there is no flourishing, that's what you just said, but now you're getting ready to send us to a land that is the best pasture of land in Egypt. Does that make sense to anybody? Yes and no. It makes sense to me, and you should be close to me. This is what it says. You and your children and your grandchildren, your flocks and your herds and all you have, there I will provide for you and sustain you so that you and your household and all that are yours may not become impoverished. For there are still 5 years of famine to come. Listen, can I help you with this? I want you to understand that this was just not about Joseph, but Joseph in his position of being ruler or over all things except for Pharaoh's house, right? He was ruler over all things. He watched the land dry up. And yet there was some working in the land that was being done. Otherwise, Joseph wouldn't have been able to say that I'm going to send you to the place that is the best land of Egypt. Why would he send his father or his people to a space that is just going to be dry? They could have just stayed close to the palace, right? But he sends them to this space because as a slave, he had been working the land. He knows what the land looks like. He knows what the land or how the land is responding. This was just not about Joseph, his brothers, and his fathers. And his father. There was a position that God meant for them to
inherit, and the land was a part of the equation. It was the best land. So watch this, because this is vitally important. He sends them to the best land of Egypt called Goshen, right? And so it proves to me that people can prosper in a space that there is famine. That's why people can look at the same space and have different experiences. What you hate, I could love. What is closed up to you can be open to me. What you lose, I can gain, because whatever area of the land that God has assigned to me, if I've been assigned to it, it is assigned to produce for me. Joseph, glory, yeah. Joseph, in his stewardship, knew he had to review the land in order to know where to place them in the land. Yep. And I believe that there was a word over Goshen. I know people are preaching Goshen as if God is going to send people into places, and wherever you are, God is going to bless. But you've got to register that there are certain assignments of a particular land, and there is no way that if a land is dry, it is possible that a land that is dry can produce for you, but it may not bring you water, but it might produce something else for you based off of its assignment to you and your assignment to it. I believe that the highlight here is that Joseph was able to register the different segments in order to allow out portions that would be more promising or fruitful for other people versus other people. So he was able to review the land, this land, and say, not call it a famine land, but he calls it the best pasture. Do you know what pastures do? Pastures feed livestock. Pastures are full of the necessities for animals to be able to graze in. Look at the terminology here. You've got to be really intrigued by how he sets them up to have the best portion, even after they put him in a scenario that was not as pleasing to him as he would have liked. Who would have wanted to be in a pit? Nobody. Who would have forgiven those who put them in a position where they now become a slave? Most people wouldn't. But Joseph, after years of development, processing, he becomes an agriculturalist. Listen, I'm telling you that even as he was able to interpret the dream was one part, but there was a relationship with the land that he had to develop in order to interpret the dream successfully or correctly. Why do I say that? I'm saying that because there are oftentimes that dream interpreters cannot interpret a dream successfully because they don't have enough exposure to bring the correct terminology to what is happening concerning a dream. So we will be missing pieces. Yes. That's why you've got to be very comfortable. You've got to become very careful about your exposure, your expansion, your reach, in order to understand the things concerning you, your purpose. It cannot be just about you dressing yourself up. When you are called to this, then you've got to manage the things that you will be positioned in. And if you cannot do that, then the land will swallow you up because you haven't had an appreciation for it. Do you get that? What did the palace include? The palace included land and livestock. Joseph was a manager. He was a manager of land and livestock. The only way that he knew that Goshen was going to be a vitality place was for him to observe, survey, work the land. He was the one that was giving orders. So imagine that he was cutting out a space. He didn't know that he was cutting it out for his family, according to the scripture, because he didn't know that they knew that he was still alive. He didn't know where they was coming from. They didn't know that he was going to be there. It just so happened that they were sent to Egypt because every other place had dried up. Joseph spent years in prison, servicing the palace and servicing the land, servicing the palace, servicing the land, servicing the palace, servicing the land. It's why he knew that Goshen was a place of abundance. In Egypt, there was obviously pockets of famine space, or majority of famine space, but there was one pasture that was purposed as the best pasture within the land. You're going to live here. I'm going to send you here. Joseph knew the inner workings of what was taking place concerning the famine and what the land needed. Yes, he had to learn the land. It's the only way that he could manage and assign and give portions to individuals. In this particular scenario, he was giving the choice land, or assigning the choice land to his family. Yeah. Look at verse 9. It says, hurry and go up to my father. Tell him your son Joseph says this to you. God has made me Lord of all of Egypt. Come down to me. Do not delay. Verse 10, you shall live in the land of Goshen, the best pasture of land in Egypt, and you shall be close to me, you and your children and your grandchildren, your flocks and your herd, and all you have. Amazing. He's telling him that his livestock, listen, you're not going to have to want for anything. Your cattle's not going to have to want for anything. Your livestock is not going to have to want for anything. They'll be able to graze in what? Pasture. And you will be sustained in the best pasture of the land. I can imagine the geological implications that Joseph had to understand about this particular place. You can't just understand it by observation. And this is why we have to really, really appreciate our forefathers, or our ancestral understanding, or our ancestral spiritual reality. Why? Because there are things that we understood just by the atmosphere of how the earth moved, how close the moon was, how far the sun was. We were able to read the stars, and those things informed how we understood the land. How we treated the land, when rain was coming into the land, when there was a storm coming. Listen, if nothing else, the scriptures were an astronomical experience of individuals being able to interpret objects within the universal sphere that informed them of what the land was saying. So it was important to them to be able to read the stars. It was important to them to be able to read the universe and the planets that they could see. It was important to them to be able to see where the moon was in order to determine and tell time. Because if you couldn't, you would lose your ability to navigate. Oh my, yes, God. And what we do now is, because we don't necessarily need those systems or desire those systems, we suggest that they are no longer necessary, or they're demonic in nature. We don't know how to read it. As a matter of fact, watch this. Astrology and astronomy are cousins. Astronomy is the science of what we see in the universe. The astrology is the passion of that science. Listen, I want you to understand that clearly, because when we start to talk about reading of the stars, there are our Eastern religions, people like Buddhists, who study and pay attention to the land, to the terra firma. They pay attention to the atmosphere around them. They pay attention to star activity. They look at the inner lining of the stars and the planets in order to understand the nature of things and the systems of things and how things are moving. We start to talk about the age of Aquarius by understanding planetary alignment and star alignment. The reason why we don't honor astrology like we continue to honor astronomy is because somebody in their era added the word divination to it. And as soon as that looked like it was going to have more influence over religion, it started to segue. People started to assume that astrology was a demonic force that only influence or release the powers of darkness. But before there was darkness, beloved, there was light. It was all light. It was all information. It was all revelation. It was all given to us for access so that we could understand how God in his splendor had created all things. We are from it and it is from us. We are living in a circular expression of it being.
Whew. When I tell you that land assignments is such a powerful teaching, it's such a powerful teaching. I hope you enjoyed this first half of land assignments from Coach She. We'll return again for the second half of land assignments sometime this week. But keep an eye for it, keep a lookout for it. But I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you understand the importance of you understanding the assignments of the land and your assignment in the land, if that makes sense. So yeah. So good night, everybody. Again, I hope you enjoyed it. I love you, and we will see you again. We will be back for regular live forum next week at 7 p.m. with the crew. We will see you soon. Bye-bye.
Something good gonna happen in this year, and I am grateful that I made it here. Yesterday's gone and a new day has appeared, and I am grateful that I made it here. Blessings gonna find me here, oh yeah. Favor gonna find me here, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I miss say money gonna find me, blessings gonna find me, oh na 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 na.
Y'all know what that is? It's amazing.
Evolution Church South Florida would like to invite you to worship with us. You can connect via our second Sunday virtual community or meet us in person for our fourth Sunday experience. Both begin at 3 p.m. sharp. Remember, this is the place where we explore, expand, and evolve. See you soon.